Hello, we are live. My name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education and Content at the Davis Phinney Foundation, and I'm here today. Very happy to be here with Greg Ritscher. How you doing, Greg?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Where are you calling in from?
I live in Panama City Beach, Florida, which is markedly warmer than where you are.
Yes, it is, and also probably less windy. Maybe it's windy here. I was actually just looking at flights to Pensacola because I was like, oh, I want to go to Destin. My daughter's never been, and I love that beach, so
Mm,
might head our way.
yep.
So Greg, well, we've known each other for many years through the foundation, but you're also a Davis Phinney Foundation ambassador recently.
Mhm. Yes.
And that's great. We did some work together on your core model for Parkinson's. We can
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that. We did an assessment program, basically, taking an idea of Parkinson's being what you call an atomic event, and then getting this sort of life assessment together of, what do I do once something like this happens to me? And you had a really interesting story of what you did, very methodical. Hey, this is the situation. This is what I know I need to do to live well. And here's I'm going to execute that every day. So we can talk a little bit about that as well. But I would love for you to just talk to the people who might not know you in our community and tell us who you are and what you do, your life pre-Parkinson's, and what happened with your diagnosis.
All right. First the earth cooled, then I was born. That's how old I am. No, I'm 67 years old. Um, Prior to Parkinson's, I was a very happy warlord of commerce. Worked in the private sector all of my life and enjoyed competing in a capitalistic society and doing all those kind of fun things. Um, I was diagnosed, I kind of self diagnosed myself. I noticed a tremor in my pinky finger, my right finger. And next time I went to my general practitioner, we looked it up and he said, oh, that's benign essential tremor. It's old sports injuries in your shoulder and no big deal. And sounded cool to me. So I bought it. Then by the time I went back the next year for my annual checkup, now the tremor was in my right hand. And he said, well, maybe there's more nerve damage than we thought. So I went with that. Then my daughter married an Australian, and they had a destination wedding here or in Colorado, up at Rocky Mountain National Park. And because they drive on the other side of the road, and none of the Australians coming had ever driven in snow, I decided to rent a bunch of limos to take us from the wedding venue to the chapel. I get in the limo with my daughter, father of the bride, and the bridesmaids, and they all start clamoring about what a beautiful bouquet the flowers have, and the aroma was amazing. And I thought to myself, that's funny. I can't smell anything. So I attributed it to that if you buy the flowers, you can't smell them. I didn't want to say anything to ruin the moment. But after all the festivities, I was showering and I asked my wife, do you have a shampoo you could not miss the odor of? And so after I lathered up, I said, sweetheart, I can't smell a thing. So we got out the iPad and I said, type in no smell and tremor. And one word popped up, starts with a P, ends with an Parkinson's. And so I said, sweetheart, I think I've got Parkinson's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it took me about 3 months to get in to see a neurologist. And he took one look at me, had me walk down the hall, turn around and walk back. And his comment was, you got Parkinson's and you got it bad,
Ooh.
which wasn't maybe what my wife wanted to hear.
Not
But
That's not the best delivery I've ever heard.
the nurse said something to that effect to him
Oh
as
my
well.
gosh.
But I simply said, hey, I'm type A personality. Let's talk straight shooting here. What are we talking about in lifespan? And
And
Uh,
how old were you again when you got
I
diagnosed?
was 55.
Okay.
And so his said, well, I have idiopathic Parkinson's, and it's almost borderline early onset, but most of my symptoms are more the idiopathic part. And so he said, you got 10, 12 years, last couple aren't going to be fun. So being the pragmatic person that I am, I'm like, well, then I got to get busy getting busy. And so started in getting involved in the Parkinson's community. And as you mentioned, we did a couple of videos, and I have a Parkinson's life assessment plan. I wrote a book called Rising Above Parkinson's, and just started on the journey of going down the road shaking.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, you let me pull this up so people can check it out. And then I'll also share the share screen. Right. So yeah. Can you see that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So there's the book. And you guys can check that out. And it lives at this website right here, gregritscher.com. And you can just go /book if you want to check it out. So did the core model, the core model, COORE model is in the book.
Yep.
And I assume that sort of core model came first. Yes. Like you were like,
Yes.
oh,
Yeah, that's
what am I
part
going
of
to do? So can you share with people, your thought process with that? And I think
Sure.
people who think, have that same sort of framework
And
of thinking will really appreciate what you created.
yeah, and as I mentioned, I was a warlord of commerce. Basically, I was a consultant to the landscape industry, and I worked with contractors and manufacturers and distributors in that industry. And CORE comes from strategic planning models, and C, it's an acronym. The C stands for, to what degree do you control what happened to you? I didn't do anything to get Parkinson's. I just have Parkinson's. The first O is ownership. Can you take ownership in what's happening to you? The second O is origin. Where did it come from? For example, if an atomic event that's attacked your life happens to be maybe lung cancer and you smoked for 20 years, you got to take ownership in that. R stands for reach. How far will this atomic event reach into your life? And finally, E is enduring. How long can you keep up what you're doing, and what can you do to kind of improve the quality of your life? So yes, I think very analytically. I've always been that type of a person. I like to put numbers to things, not just, how do you feel today? Well, that depends on what you're comparing it to. So I've always, been focused on doing that. That's what I did in my business career. So I just applied the exact same thing to my life. I don't want people to think, oh, poor Greg, he has Parkinson's. Everybody has these atomic events in their lives. I've heard things like your mother didn't survive the surgery, your daughter was involved in a date rape. Everybody hears terrible things in their lives, but it's how you respond to those things that I think helps people live full and abundant lives, despite the fact maybe you have Parkinson's.
Yeah, I love that. How did you look at those ones for you? So when you say control, what did that look like for you?
Well, to me, it was, I don't think I did anything in particularly wrong. The first thing I started doing is, well, was it genetics? It's one of those deals you go, I've heard of Parkinson's, but I don't know much about it, which I think is how, 98% of America thinks. And so I started to, look, was it genetics? I took a number of genetic tests and that type of thing. By the way, I'll put in a plug for everybody to participate in as many different research studies as you can. The baby boom generation, of which, the vast majority of us with Parkinson's are, we've changed the rules of engagement on virtually everything in our lives. Why not Parkinson's? And if
Yeah.
we all get together and, get involved in these research studies, the sooner we'll find maybe a cause and more hopefully maybe a cure.
Yeah.
So I looked at my life and said, well, it's not genetic. My GBA, my PAARK2, the LARC gene, all of mine were fine. Kind of a funny story. I did the genetic testing and I thought, this could be interesting. What if I'm a Viking or a Phoenician, and I sailed the ocean blue? Well, it turns out I'm Germanic, but I have at least 5 ancestors that were Neanderthals.
Oh, all right.
So much for the Viking
Right.
theory of happiness.
Right.
So, when I looked at to what degree do I control the Parkinson's, I don't control anything about having Parkinson's, but I can certainly control my reaction to it. In my talks, I talk about the phrase, opportunity is nowhere. When you hear you've got Parkinson's, that changes your life. And to a large degree, it looks like opportunity is nowhere. But if you take the same exact phrase, opportunity, and put a space between the W and the H in nowhere, it now says opportunity is now here. It's the exact same language, the exact same letters, in the exact same order. The difference is that gap, that space. And Viktor Frankl, a famous psychologist, talks about humans uniquely have this responsibility. We can choose to respond to stimulus any way we want because we can pause. We have what's called metacognition. We can think about what we think about. No other animal in the world can do that. And so we can think about, hey, what's happened to me? Oh, I have Parkinson's. Okay, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to make that to the advantage of myself, my family, my wife, and my friends and society as a whole? And that's the route that I've chosen to pursue.
Yeah. So I know that you have, well, you were working at the time. So let's talk about that. And then in a minute, we'll talk a little bit about, your relationships. You're very close with your family and sort of how that whole thing ended up. But, what happened when you were initially diagnosed? And did you start to feel anything that was getting in the way of your ability to do your job?
Oh, absolutely. Parkinson's is I call it a regressive disease. You don't get better. You can only hope to, paddle and stay in one spot. The river is constantly pushing you downstream. In my work, I'm a very open person, so I was more than happy to tell people, hey, I've got Parkinson's and here's, what I know of it and here's what it'll do. At the time, I was working with a contractor and helping them grow their business. And as those of us with Parkinson's know, oftentimes the psychological symptoms are far worse, yet far less obvious than the physical symptoms. Everybody can see my tremor. Not everybody can see my apathy. I don't care that I don't care. Not everybody can see anxiety, where you get anxious about simple things and you just wonder how on earth is that ever going to work out? And you go, you mean getting in the car and driving to the food store? I think that's going to work out okay. And so I was very open with the people that I was working with at the time. We modified what I did. So instead of being involved in sales and marketing and that type of thing, which is a lot more pressure. I took on more of the role of training and facilitating. And in the landscape industry, we used an H-2B program to bring in a lot of foreign nationals. So we started English as a second language classes for our employees to attract good employees. And so I did that for 2 years. And then the owner decided to sell the business. We put together a package, successfully did that. And then, I told my wife, I'm through. I don't think I have one of the largest symptoms that I dislike the most about Parkinson's is the lack of matrix thinking. You are faced with a problem in, pre-Parkinson's, you're like, we'll do this, 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 and this. Now you're going, well, I know do this, but what were those other things? And I took to writing things down on my phone so that I'd have like a ready resource if I got stuck in a negotiation or something like that. But I knew it was basically the end of my business career based on, what I did for a living. And so to modify things, my wife and I, our children, we had 3 daughters. We raised them all, and we decided to move down to Florida. And so we took 3 years, starting over in South Padre Island and working our way around the Gulf, and spent a month at 7 different places to kind of get a feel for the vibe and that type of thing, and finally settled on Panama City Beach and moved here just over 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. That sounds like fun. What was it about Panama City Beach that made you plop down?
Well, Panama City Beach is part of the Emerald Coast. So a combination of sugar sand, crystal clear water. We were able to buy a home about 2 blocks off the beach. So we, can walk there. We have a golf cart. It's a golf cart type community. So the grandkids kind of dig coming down to grandpa's, and I'll drive, grandpa. I love when you get in and they're telling you, grandpa, you didn't use your left turn signal.
Right.
And you go, you're 7.
Right.
Calm down.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, well, being who I am, I put a matrix together, a fishbone model, and we analyzed all the locations, and including things like hurricanes, the negative side of things. But with healthcare facilities, with the weather, the warmth and the humidity really helped my Parkinson's quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
The cold, dry air of Colorado, once I start shivering, I'm shivering for hours. And so the warmth down here really helps. And I've been able to, when I first came down, I looked around, couldn't find a Parkinson's support group. So I started one.
Excellent.
And we've grown it to about 20 people after a year and a half. And I've gotten involved down here in the North Florida, or what is called the panhandle of Florida. And I'm involved in a number of Parkinson's organizations. And you mentioned certainly the ambassador program, trying to, I just got done speaking last Saturday to a group in Pensacola. And that's
great.
the new vision. I'm a big fan of having a vision or a mission in your life. The vision of my life is to make Parkinson's wish it had never met me.
Yes. So what is the healthcare system out there? Do you have a movement disorder specialist nearby? Is it a pretty good drive, or what?
My neurologist that's a movement specialist is in Pensacola, which is about an hour and 20 minutes as far as a drive. So not bad.
Yeah.
It's not close by. Colorado, the Denver area specifically for Colorado, has a much more advanced care network. put together when you take a look at the various organizations that are there. I just look at that as an opportunity to be part of the person that helps build that for the rest of the people
Yeah.
in, here in the Panhandle.
I can't
Obviously,
imagine it's not a high need area.
oh, it's huge.
Right?
Florida has the most number of people with Parkinson's in it, and it also has the highest percentage of the population, the incidence
Oh,
of
Parkinson's.
Parkinson's.
Wow.
I attribute that to two reasons. One, there's an awful lot of old people down here
Yeah.
for socioeconomic reasons, but number two, there's a lot of Midwesterners, and as you know, it's still kind of up in the air as to what causes Parkinson's, whether it's environmental toxins, genetics, or something in your gut, a biorhythmic issue. I personally think it's probably some combination of all three,
Hmm.
and everybody's Parkinson's is different. However many people with Parkinson's, that's how many different symptoms that you'll see in them. And that's one of the things that I think has caused Parkinson's of a lot of diseases to be still almost in its infancy and progression, even though it was first observed back in 1817 by Dr. James Parkinson.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough one, right? Um, so like when I mean, obviously your family knew from the beginning, but what were those conversations like? And your daughters, all three of them were out of the house at that point, correct? Like they
Yes.
were, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did
Very
that go? And what has it been like?
well. My family is my bedrock. My wife of 44 years is the best thing that ever happened in my life by a long shot. Um, my three daughters, I certainly initially there was a lot of tears and fear, as there always is. Fear, by the way, is an acronym, and it stands for Future Expectations Appear Real. And I think that's critical for people with Parkinson's to understand that it's okay to have fear, but just understand that that's the future expectations. That's not necessarily what's going to happen, especially if you go and do something about it. Exercise, diet, meds, pursuing medical procedures, and things like that. So I was very open with my friends, my family, my church, my faith, and shared with people, hey, I've got Parkinson's. Uh, the vast majority of responses are either, I think my grandpa had that, or what is that? A lot of people don't, really understand what Parkinson's is and how it affects your mind. They just notice the physical symptoms more often than not, whether it's Michael J. Fox or Muhammad Ali with their dyskinesias and the twitching, or Greg and his tremor. That's generally what they notice, the slowness, the lack of movement, and that type of thing. So I'm a big fan of just opening up and telling people this is the situation, and we're going to go from there. And my wife and I sat down, we put a bucket list together and said, look, realistically, I probably had, from my date of my diagnosis, which is April 26, 2011, um, I probably have 15, 20, if I make it beyond 20 years, I think I'll call that a good run.
Hmm.
So now you got to, it says in the movie Shawshank Redemption, you get busy living or you get busy dying. I
Hmm.
choose living.
Oh, I love that. So what would you say changed? You got the diagnosis and you started researching because that's who you are and you learned what you could. What are some of the things that changed for you on a daily basis? What behaviors did you do that maybe you hadn't done on a regular basis prior to that?
Well, I've always been athletic and wanted to stay in shape, but now I wanted to do what created the greatest return for good in my Parkinson's. Um, Too many people, I think, with Parkinson's say, well, my range of motion isn't what it could be. My back hurts. I can tell you every day I've woken up with Parkinson's, my back is killing me. I tend to have dystonia in my hands where your hands curl up like that. And in the morning, I have to literally pry them apart before we go brush our teeth or try shaving. Um, so there's a number of things that you have to adapt to. But again, opportunity is now here. If you pause and take a look at, what you can do, I call them tricks of the trade. And in our support group every month, we talk about what's a trick of the trade that you learned to do. It can be as simple as wearing pullover shirts and not button down shirts, and slip on shoes. You don't have to tie the shoes because everything physical is going to take you longer. And you have to, be willing to accept that, and learning to live with the psychological symptoms, which I personally think are the hardest to deal with because other people can't see them or sense them. And some days, I mentioned apathy as an example. Uh, I was just reading a good book on Parkinson's, and it says, the title of the chapter is "I Don't Care That I Don't Care."
Right. Yeah.
And you're like, holy moly, you got to care. You got to, because I have found, for my wife, my major caregiver, that, when she asks me what I want for dinner and I go, I don't care. That's not what she asked me.
Mm.
And it's frustrating for her to think, hey, I'm making dinner for you. Just say I want spaghetti, or, I want lasagna, or whatever it is that you want. But don't just say, I don't care. And so just learning little things like that that help you get through the day, focus on what you can do. One of the things I talk about in my talks a lot is rarely in the Parkinson's community do you hear people say, since I've had Parkinson's, I started fill in the blank. I started paddleboarding. I started climbing 14,000 foot mountains with my friend because he could do it and I could do it. And, they talk about it's no small feat to hike up a 14,000 foot mountain. And it's an even bigger feat when you're carrying Parkinson's on your back. But when you get to the top, the view is priceless
Mm-hmm.
because Parkinson's can go somewhere else
Mm.
because you got there. And so maybe people can't climb 14,000 foot mountains, but you can do something. You can walk around the lake 20 times or participate in the many fundraising events, the walks, the runs, the bikes, the cycling issues, and get involved in the community. This disease is not going to go away. Some of the recent studies that were released are talking about when I first was diagnosed, all the literature that I read said about 40, 50,000 people have get Parkinson's in a year. Then after a few years, maybe it's 60 or 70. Most recent study, maybe it's over 90. I think Parkinson's is a pandemic. It's exploding because the baby boomers are all getting in the peak
Yeah.
years of following that. And maybe for the first time, even medical science is starting to recognize there's so many under engaged communities that we don't even have a vague idea of how many people have Parkinson's in those communities.
Yeah.
So to me, that's why the ambassador program makes a lot of sense. Let's go be if you got Parkinson's, you got Parkinson's. Let's go be an ambassador and let's be a good one.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I love it. Yeah, that the rate, and every time I think about it, somebody will say, "What do you do?" And everyone always knows somebody with it. And I'm like, there's no way it's 60,000 people. That makes no sense. Everybody I talk to's got all these people down the list that they know. But, it's a disease of aging, right? And for a very long time, people just thought I'm getting old. And so a lot more people are looking into it. We had a lot more pesticides that came in the, mid to, last quarter of the 1900s. So a lot of those results are showing up many years later. So yeah, there's a lot.
And
There's a lot that's playing a part in this.
you bring up a great point. I was just talking about, people say, "Oh, Greg, I physically can't do some of the stuff that you do." Okay, but you know what you can do? You can contact your senator. You can
Mm-hmm.
contact your House of Representatives. You can tell them, "Hey, we're watching. We're a voting block. Old people," and I say that lovingly because I'm an old person. Old people vote.
Yeah.
Politicians know that. And so it's simple to get involved with some of the Parkinson's organizations and say, "Hey, contact your senator, contact your representative and tell them, we're watching." It makes absolutely no sense to me as a business person and as a warlord of commerce that the US government, the EPA, authorized the use of paraquat
Right.
and TCE, when on the other hand, the US government spent $56 billion on payments for people with Parkinson's. So everyone's always, well, we're running out of money. We, don't have enough money to do that. I got a really good idea. How about we don't use paraquat?
Right.
So let's people with Parkinson's, one of the things you can do very simply, because we've got all day to type. When I was a warlord of commerce, I was never a good typist, maybe 30 words a minute. I can bang out at least 2 or 3 words a minute now, but I got the time to sit here
Right.
and type and tell people, I'm watching how you vote on this.
Right. Yeah. So you have a little bit of a DBS story, deep brain stimulation. So I'd love to go there, but let's start a little bit back with what were the initial drugs that you started taking, and did you take them right away? And then how were they in managing your symptoms?
Well, like most people with Parkinson's, that first year before you've started taking any drugs, you're the golden guinea pig to the medical community
Mm-hmm.
because, and by that I say that, lovingly, but by that I mean you don't have any medical pharmaceuticals in your system that would alter the results of the study that they're looking for. So for the first year that I had Parkinson's, I participated in a study. The name of the drug, is that long and starts with an X, and so we just called it Paradise. But so I did a year-long study. Then once they started me on pharmaceuticals, I started with Sinemet, which is carbidopa levodopa, the gold medal standard. By the way, just a real quick aside, I bring this up in my talks. That drug was patented in the United States in 1962. It was 1968 before the FDA said you could use it. Name another human malady that the gold standard pharmaceutical drug today is the same thing it was in 1968. I'll give you aspirin for heart patients. Other than that, I'm drawing a big blank. So to me, it's just absolutely amazing that carbidopa levodopa is still the gold standard of the drug. So I started on a regimen of Sinemet, amantadine, and Primapixel. All of those do different things, meaning either enhance the amount of dopamine being produced or enhance the ability of that dopamine to transfer from one nerve axiom to another. But I quickly found that, especially with Prima Pixel, that I had issues with impulse control disorder. Parkinson's is kind of the dopamine, the neurotransmitter dopamine is kind of the happiness drug. And it gets you to do that. And I'd be driving down the road going to an appointment, and I'd see a guy pass me with a boat. And I'd go, a boat? I've never had a boat. I need to get a boat. And I'd literally follow somebody for 30 miles thinking of all the fun, where's the nearest boat store? And then all of a sudden, blink, and you're like, what are you talking? You live in Colorado.
Colorado, right?
There's 4 lakes
Right.
in Colorado. What are you going to do with a boat? And then you're, oh, look what time it is. I missed my appointment. So as soon as I noticed that, I said, that's it. We're stopping that. So I titrated.
Well, had your doctor told you about impulse control disorders and to look out for it?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you connected those and said, wait a second.
Yeah, I'm an avid reader. I've always been a searcher, always looking for the next, answer. And so, for me, it was one of those deals you go, wait a minute, this seems like an impulse control. And before it turns into gambling or women or drugs or any of those other things. And unfortunately, I have a couple of Parkinsonian friends that I've known. One gentleman ended up, he had 10 saltwater aquariums, over 20 gallons in his home.
Wow.
That's like a museum.
Yeah.
And he spent literally tens of thousands of dollars doing that before he realized, hey, wait a minute, I live in Colorado. What the heck am I doing with saltwater aquariums? So I took myself off of that, said, hey, I'm not doing this. The amantadine for me tended to have the issue of constipation. And so that just became something that, even changing my diet and trying to focus on some of those kind of things, when I'm on amantadine, that's not a good deal. So as far as I'm concerned, I'll, even if it means a shorter life, I'll live a shorter good life than just trying to do the endurance deal. So I now take, instead of Cinemet, because April 26th of this year will be my 12th anniversary. I now take Ritscher, which is levodopa in the extended release formula. So it helps kind of smooth out your ups and downs, which as you progress with Parkinson's, you generally tend to find that your on and off periods come closer together and are sharper in amplitude.
Right. So somewhere along the way, you started thinking about deep brain stimulation. Is this something, again, you brought up to your doctor, or your doctor brought up to you and said, hey, Greg, I think you're a great candidate. Let's see if we can start taking the first steps?
Fortunately for me, I brought it up because I was, noticing that my symptoms were getting more, let's call them interesting. And so I started looking at, some alternatives, ultra focus, sound waves, and there's a variety of different things. And then you can either say this is by chance. I am a person of deep faith. I say that, the God I worship intervened and introduced me to a person. Her name is Elaine Kiebosh. She works for Boston Scientific. And we happened to run into each other at a Parkinson's race event and met and started talking. And, that was all I needed to hear how things work. I'm a person that studies things. So, when did this start? Back in 1987 with the French doctors, and when did it come to America? And who are the competitors, who are the people that do, what are their pros and cons, what are Boston Scientific's pros and cons. And so for the past 18 months, I've been pursuing getting into or having deep brain stimulation surgery. Unfortunately, I've run into American insurance, and there's a number of tests that you need to take and pass for the to get approval to be a candidate for deep brain stimulation surgery. Generally, those criteria now, and this criteria has changed over the years, but generally they want you to have had Parkinson's and been on Sinemet or levodopa for 4 to 5 years. So you have kind of a rhythmic on and off cycle. You can't have any form of Parkinson's dementia going or anything like that. That is a really bad outcome. And then you have to be physically strong enough to tolerate the surgery. So I went through that process at one location, got all the way through the process, which included a CAT scan and an MRI and all those other fun things you get to pay for. And was finally, oh, we accept you, you're ready to go. Then I got a letter from the corporate headquarters that said, unfortunately, we're no longer accepting Medicare
How
Advantage
frustrating.
program. And you're like, what? And so I then started pursuing learning all about the Medicare game and tried to do the end run and said, well, what if I drop Medicare Advantage and pick up Medicare with an augmented plan, and tried N. For whatever reason they love to use letters. And so I tried the N plan. Then about a month later, I get a memo back that said, no, we're declining you for N. And so I called him up and said, why? What in my medical records, got you to decline me? This is the part that kills you in America. They said, we don't actually look at your medical records. We look at your billing, the medical insurance billing. And in the past, someone has billed saying they helped me with vascular heart issues and kidney issues, kidney dysfunction. And, I mentioned to him, I said, well, I know me really well. I've been hanging out with me for 67 years. I have never had a heart condition. I've never had a kidney condition. I'm the healthiest diseased person you know. And they're like, okay, they could care less. So after going through, let's say, long story short, I had to pursue DBS at another hospital with another neurosurgeon and another deal. So I'm going to be working with the Ascension group out of Pensacola, as opposed to driving over to Jacksonville, because that's where I was pursuing it in the first place. And I'm working with Dr. Deborah Bolin, my neurologist. She's a movement specialist. She's the only one in the Panhandle region of Florida. When I speak to college age kids or high school kids, I challenge them. Hey, you guys are sitting here. You're just happy to be out of class, listening to an old guy talk about his Parkinson's. But here's my challenge. One of you could be the person that finds the cure.
And yeah.
That'd be a cool thing.
Yeah, it would.
So
now you're on the right path, you're getting there, and you're actually going to go in, you have your date and you're getting bilateral, correct?
Yes, I'm doing bilateral with Boston Scientific is the device that I think makes the most sense from both a safety and an effectiveness perspective. And just curiously, I've been doing this about 18 months. Finally, last Friday, got the approval, and we were trying to schedule the first surgery. It'll take place over a series of 3 surgeries. And the first surgery and the first date that worked for myself, the neurosurgeon, and the neurologist was April 26th. And I mentioned earlier that's the actual date of my Parkinson's diagnosis. And people call that, hey, what are the odds of that?
Right.
There are no odds to
Right.
that. I'll attribute that one to God as well.
Yeah. So what are you most hoping is going to change after you get DBS?
My expectations, and I think that's one of the real critical things for people with Parkinson's, no matter what phase of the disease you're in or what you're doing, is to establish your expectations right. And my expectation is that it'll help control my tremor. One of the scariest things I've done in my life was, in order to do the testing, you have to be completely off your meds. So I had to stop 18 hours before my testing. And, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 5 years ago, I'd get off and I'd shake a little bit more, but nothing too bad. This time, whoa, there's no tying shoes. There's no buttoning buttons. That really struck me as to how far I had, come down that scale.
Yeah, that's scary.
Rootin' tootin' there, no doubt about that. So finally, I'll be able to do the deep brain stimulation surgery, and one lead will go into my GPI, the other goes into the STN, which are just parts of your brain, and they're words so long you can't say them in English and all that. That's one thing, before I die, I need to find out, what does medical science's deal with everything's got to be 17 letters long and start with XYZ as the first 3 letters?
Right.
It kind of cracks me up.
All right. Well, that's exciting and totally different, a new chapter in your Parkinson's and how you live with it, and to be interested to see what you're able to do after that. I did put a link in here. We have a whole bunch of resources on deep brain stimulation for anyone who's interested and wants to learn more. Well, that's awesome.
And
go ahead.
Just to finish, because you asked me what my expectations are, and I didn't quite finish that. I know that it'll help my tremor tremendously. I also know it'll help a little bit with bradykinesia, the stiffness, maybe the range of motion that I'll have. It is not the end all be all. I'll probably still take some meds, but hopefully what I'll be able to do is maybe increase by 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, the effective part of my life. And again, I'm in this to make Parkinson's wish it had never met me. So anything that can keep me speaking to groups and working with organizations to try and get the word out on Parkinson's and its awareness, to me, that's a day well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. To wrap it up, what do you wish you had known 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 12 years ago when you were diagnosed? And what do you say to people that come to you newly diagnosed, really nervous, really feeling that, my life just flashed before me?
I wish 2 things. I wish I would have known more, and I wish there was more information. You guys do a good job of it, but I wish there were more information about the psychological impacts of Parkinson's. Because it's easy to say, oh, I'm constipated. It's easy to say, oh, I have a muscle cramp in my hand. It's easy to recognize the tremor. What other people can't see, even your care partner, like my wife, that's no one's closer to me than her, is the apathy, the anxiety, the depression at times that, I can vividly think of days when you first wake up, that first instant, you go, oh, hey, it's a new day. And then all of a sudden you go, uh-oh, I can't open my hands because of the dystonia. And then you go, oh crap, not a whole nother, day of going through this. Geez, oh Pete. What I wish that other people know, and what I try and help newly diagnosed people that I've been able to find in my life, on the anniversary of my diagnosis, 426, every year since about the fourth year, I send an email to my daughters, my wife, my friends, my ex-business acquaintances, and ask them, what have they seen changed over the last year? Because what I don't want to be is the proverbial frog in the slowly warming pot.
Right.
You just sit there and, hey, this feels good. And then you're like, hey, what smells so good? And I couldn't tell you that anyways, because I can't smell. But what I have heard from everybody is the Greg Ritscher with Parkinson's is a kinder, gentler person.
That's nice.
That I'm probably much more effective as a speaker, as a ambassador, as a witness to other people for the disease because of Parkinson's. It's actually made me a better person. So what I tell people to do is, again, don't focus on what you can't do. You can't do anything about that. Focus on what you can do and try and figure out ways to incorporate other people's help, because other people get shots of serotonin when they're helping you.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And you clamming up and not opening up to your family or your friends, you're quite honestly eliminating a chance for them to express their love to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Tina says, I've just celebrated my 12th year, 11 great years. Oh, you're on the same path. Polly says, while Parkinson's wishes it had never met you, we are so glad to have met you, Greg. Agreed.
Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate you telling everybody your story, and you have so much to offer. And I put these links in the chat, but I'll also put them in the description so people can check out the core model. They can check out our assessment workshop that we did and recorded, and they can also check out your book. So thank you. Thank you for being an ambassador. Thank you for sharing our work and doing the work that you're doing in your community. And hopefully, you're going to build that panhandle area that is desperate need of more care for people with Parkinson's. You'll be a big part of that.
I live my life by a mantra that says success in life is a journey. It's not a destination. You never get there. Significance in life is a gift because it brings hope. Life is an occasion. Rise to it.